Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce Landi Simone. Landi is an EAS master beekeeper.
Right.
She is from the northern part of New Jersey, and she runs, how many hives does she have?
About 100.
About 100 hives. She was the director for EAS for master beekeeping testing for many years. So she's kind of stepped back from that, but she's busy with her own stuff and teaching.
Choco.
Happy to have her.
Thank you, Jan. And where the heck is my talk? I just had it. Give me a second here.
And Tucker was with me.
Go. There it is.
This be a B meeting? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Whoops. Okay. Huh. Okay, okay, here we are. And here you are. Boy. And
You have to share.
yeah, I've got to share my screen. And that's fine. And here's the talk. Okay. But how, okay. You can't see that, right?
No,
Oh, I hate this. My Mac goes to different, like,
do unshare.
okay. Well, it's like,
And then go to share screen again. And it should show any windows you have open.
well, but you see that there's like two different. Let me close it first. I'm just going to close the talk. Okay. And go back to you guys. And okay, you're here. And that talk should be here too. There it is. Okay. Now we should be okay. That's going down. All right. Now we're good. It's like if I swipe left or right on my MacBook Pro, it's like a whole different desktop, which is kind of weird and a little confusing. And then I can't find things that are.
Yeah, it's a 2-finger swipe. There you go.
And now we're good. Okay. Sorry about that, guys and gals. Now we just got to do this and hopefully we'll be okay.
Do you want questions as you're doing your presentation?
Yes.
Or do you want them at the end?
No, as they come up, please.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the Zoom participants to put your questions in the chat.
Right.
Okay.
And if somebody can monitor the chat for me, because I can't talk and I can't give the presentation and look at the chat at the same time. I'm not quite that good. So get somebody to monitor the chat and just interrupt me when a question comes up, okay? All right. So I thought about this and can you see all of the words on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because I've got thing on the right-hand side there that blocks a little bit of the writing. But so, raising queens is kind of probably the penultimate challenge if you're a beekeeper. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, I started doing it, I think, when I had maybe 5 years experience, and that's probably about the minimum that you might want. If you do it with less than 5 years experience, you're really challenging yourself. But most hobbyists don't really have the resources to raise at least a lot of queens. because if you're going to have, get into an operation where you really raise queens, it's usually about 50 colonies that you need at a minimum. Most beekeepers, experienced beekeepers I know, would give that as a good ballpark number. So raising queens requires knowledge of grafting, which is a big one that scares a lot of people away. Cell starters, cell finishers, mating nukes and mating yards, drone mother yards. And a lot of that, is kind of beyond the resources of a hobbyist. So does that mean you shouldn't try and do it? No. If you understand the basic principles, you can definitely raise some queens. You're not necessarily going to raise 100 of them, but you can raise a handful of queens. You can, make queens for yourself. I mean, queens have become very expensive. I don't know about you guys up there, but down here, locally raised queen is about $50. What are you guys paying for queens in New Hampshire?
50, 55.
About the same. Okay. So if you can save we're all frugal is the word, right? So if we can avoid spending money, we will. I love this little girl, by the way. I think it's a little girl. I just thought she was like the cutest thing. So what are the basic principles of
When are you gonna be ready for dinner?
Hold on one second. People keep popping on and they're not muted, but they're
you need to
supposed to.
get muted.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
ready for dinner now, but I have to give this talk first. Okay, so one, you want your best colony as a queen mother. Okay, so you want the best genetics that you've got in your apiary. Okay, so that's principle number one. Principle number two, food. Okay, abundant food, nectar and pollen. So wait until, if you want good queens, the best time to do it is during the prime, flows. When you've got the nice strong nectar and pollen flows, that's when you want to raise your queens. If you do it outside that time period, you have to compensate and it's difficult. Okay. 3, strong colonies to raise cells. Why strong colonies? Because the temperature of the queen cells has to be regulated. Okay. Queens are very sensitive to changes in temperature. If you don't have a strong enough colony, you can have problems with the cells. So strong colonies. Also, you've got a lot of nurse bees in strong colonies, and you need the queens to be well fed. So you need a lot of those young nurse bees eating the pollen, right, that they're bringing in and the nectar and feeding the queens. Now, these last two aren't, I mean, those first 3 items are the principles of queen rearing. Good breeder queen, lots of food, and strong colonies. Those are the 3 biggest things to keep in mind. Now, the last 2 things, using the bees' swarming instincts to help you, this makes it easy for a hobbyist to raise a few queens. Okay. And the very last one is something that I do in my own operation. I've probably given you guys talks about keeping nukes on hand. So if you raise queens in spring and put them in nucleus colonies and then manage the nukes in a separate yard, you will always have queens. And then overwinter whatever you don't use. You'll have queens, you'll have brood, you'll have food stores if you need those at any time during the season. So that whole nuke yard is a support yard for you for your entire operation. At least that's what I do. So before we get into how you do this as a hobbyist, let's look at how the commercial guys do it, and gals. Okay, 1, you pick your breeder queen. Very important. 2, you find from your breeder queen, you look for a frame of eggs and very, very young larvae. Okay, day-old larvae, 24 hours. They're tiny. 3, you graft. So you're moving those 24-hour-old larvae out of their cells, okay, and into a special little cell cup on a special frame that, you know, you're going to use to grow your queen cells. You transfer that cell frame to a starter colony. Your starter colony may be queenless, it may be queen right, but in a mode where it wants to raise queen cells, like very far away from their queen. There are different ways that we do this. If your starter colony was queenless and very small, after a day, once the cells are started, you transfer that cell frame to a big finishing colony. And the finishing colony then feeds the queen cells and raises the young queens when they're capped. And just about a day before the queens are supposed to emerge, the queen cells get put into individual mating nukes. And from those mating nukes, they fly to mate. And after about a week, you're checking to see if you've got eggs. So that's kind of an overview of a commercial operation. There's a lot of variations, a lot of different ways of doing it. But every single one of them relies on really strong, really well-fed colonies to finish the cells. So the one thing that is hard, because bees have parthenogenesis, okay, where unfertilized eggs give rise to males and fertilized eggs give rise to females, the problem is in mating, controlling mating. You know, unless you're doing instrumental insemination, it's really hard to control the drone side. So commercial breeders have drone mother yards where the genetics is just as important as the queen mother yards, okay? And they're placed strategically around the mating apiaries so that, you know, those virgin queens will fly and mate with Mr. Right. So, grafting. Okay, this is the step that intimidates most hobbyists. And, you know, it intimidates people like me in their 70s because I can't friggin' see anymore. And fortunately, I started grafting a long time ago when I could see. So at least I have, you know, I know what the experience is like and I can still kind of do it, but I need a little help. I can't do it without special equipment. Take a look here. Okay, this diagram on the left side, the top left, E is for egg. That one, that's the size larva that you're grafting. So it's really pretty much the size of an egg, where the membrane surround, you know, eggs don't hatch. There's a chorion membrane that just sort of disintegrates, and then the little larva is there inside that membrane. You can see it's not even really curled up tight the way the older larvae are. So these are really, really small. But the beautiful thing about these particular cells is that all the egg and all of these larvae are floating in a sea of royal jelly. Okay, and that's what you want. Nice pool of royal jelly. And if you feel ambitious, you can do the grafting. So you're picking out the right size larva from your frame that has eggs and very young larvae, and you're transferring that larva using a special tool into these cups on the cell frame. And these little plastic cups are called JZBZ cells. Okay, JZBZ. My grandson's nickname is Jay, so he's my JZBZ boy. And only another beekeeper gets that. All right, so this is what I use. And one of the members in our club was nice enough to give me one of these. He happens to be a podiatrist, but this is something that like my dentist uses. And it comes with a variety of magnifying glasses, so you can pick what works for you. And there's a light. And I put this thing on when I'm going to graft, and it really makes a huge difference in my ability to see the larvae and pick them up. And this little gizmo here is called a Chinese grafting tool. There's several different kinds of grafting tools. The others are made of stainless steel and they have like a little hook on the end. And they work, but this Chinese grafting tool has a little bamboo, a little piece of flexible bamboo on the end and a plunger. So you can slip that bamboo end under the larva, pick her up, transfer her to the JZBZ cell, and then use the plunger to push her off and into the cell. She has to stay at the same orientation because if you flip her, she'll drown, which is another very cool thing about bees, okay? These larvae are floating in a pool of royal jelly. Well, their breathing tubes, their spiracles are on their sides. So they close the spiracles on the downside where the royal jelly is so that they don't drown. And only the spiracles on the top side are taking in air. So if you flip the larva when you're grafting her, you're gonna, the wrong spiracles are facing up and that poor little larva will drown. So it takes a little practice. All right, starter colonies. A starter colony is a colony that gets the cells started. So the bees just begin to draw out the cell, okay, just barely begin to draw it out, and they're feeding that larva copious amounts. I happen to like what's called a swarm box as a starter hive because I took about 20 years ago, roughly. I took the University of Minnesota's queen rearing class with Marla Spivak and Gary Reuter. At that time, they were still working on the hygienic line, Minnesota Hygienic Queens. And I had a lot of fun in this class. I took a plane to Minnesota and it was great. So this is what they use. They use a swarm box. And what a swarm box is basically I'll show you. This is my swarm box here. It's a nucleus box, okay, with the bottom is just screen and there's screen all on the bottom sides of the box. Why do you need so much screening? Because you close the bees in. Okay, they can't fly from this box. And as any of you know who have transported nucleus colonies or even packages, they must be ventilated because the worst possible thing is for them to not have access to the air. They'll overheat in just like that. So because my operation is all mediums, I use a deep swarm box because it's just the right size. There's room underneath where the frames sit for the screening. If you have a deep operation, you need to make a special swarm box that is deeper than a deep by about, 4 inches or so. This isn't the greatest photo, but that is a little dish with a sponge in it, and you put some water in there, okay, so that the bees have access to water. And you put in frames of nurse bees, frames of pollen and nectar, and then you put your cells in there, your cell frames, and those nurse bees have nothing else to do but to feed those cells and begin drawing them out. And this is what you get. So you can see that this is just the beginning of a queen cell. And it actually looked like a pretty nice grafting job there for this guy. So that's what a starter hive or colony does for you. And now these cells will get put into the finishing colony, okay? So finishing colonies, when I told you that they were strong, okay, this is what the University of Minnesota gave me, okay, for a finishing colony. This is a triple deep, and it's loaded with bees, okay, loaded with nurse bees, food. There's 2 diagrams here because the second one shows where the cell frames go, okay. You start out those start with frames of young larvae, okay, an open brood that bees are feeding, the nurse bees are feeding. You take those out and you put in your cell frames. So finishing colonies are always very strong. Okay, and there's your finished queen cells. What you're looking for is up here in the JZBZ cup, okay, there should still be royal jelly when you're ready to put this in the mating nuke, okay? If you did it right and there was lots of food and you had lots of nurse bees with a whole bunch of pollen, you should still have royal jelly in the cup. And that means that your queen got the best possible nutrition, and that's what makes good queens. Really good nutrition, that and mating well. Okay, so here's your commercial queen mating yard, often with hundreds of nukes in it. Lots of different kinds of mating nukes are used commercially. Some people have individual hives. Some people have, deep hive bodies with several compartments, each having its own entrance. And there's always multiple drone mother yards, okay, saturated with colonies that have the genetics you want. So that's what they do on a commercial scale. Now, how are you going to do it if you've got like half a dozen hives in your backyard? Okay. You can pretty much do everything that the commercial guys do, except the thing that you're going to have problems with or you can't really control is the drone mother side. Unless you've got multiple apiaries or that you've got beekeepers around in your area, okay, with good genetics. Some of us, like, I raise queens, and I've got a friend, John Gott, another master beekeeper who raises queens. And he will give queens to nearby hobbyists and beekeepers in the area of his queen mating yard so that he can get better genetics in that area. But, you can get some good, you can roll the dice and you can still get some good queens. You're not necessarily going to be able to, get all the genetics you want. But you can raise some good queens. So this is queen number 62. I came home with her from the University of Minnesota 20 years ago. She was the best breeder queen I ever had. And it was one that Marla Spivak raised. This was a Minnesota hygienic. So what makes a good queen? What are you going to look for? And you've got, here you are. Okay, this is one of my mentees here who lives in my own hometown. She started keeping bees when she was 16 years old. And she's now a freshman at Rutgers, and she hasn't lost a single colony yet. So I'm very proud of Maddie. So question is, okay, what are you looking for? If that's how many hives you've got 5 hives, which one are you going to pick to graft from? Gentleness, very important. Maybe not as important for you guys if you're in an area, a very rural area, okay? For me in suburban New Jersey, northern New Jersey, gentleness is critical. Really, really important to be a good neighbor. I don't want any hot hives. Productivity, obviously, okay? We all want colonies that produce some good honey. Disease resistance, okay, and mite resistance. Those are some of the most important things that we are looking at now, okay? Wintering ability, that's even more important for you guys than it is for me. Low swarming propensity, that's something that's more important for me than it is for you. And hygienic behavior, okay? A lot of mite-resistant genetics are associated with hygienic behavior, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more because I think it's something that you can and should be looking for. So people think of hygienic bees as being a race, but it's not. It's a genetic trait, a recessive genetic trait. And any population of bees can exhibit hygienic behavior. So hygienic bees are 90% resistant to American foul brood, and they're also extremely resistant to chalk brood. So if somebody calls me up and tells me they've seen chalk brood in their hives, I tell them, okay, requeen with a hygienic queen. And you will, that'll clear up the chalk brood right away. So they have some resistance to varroa mites, not enough that you can forego treatment completely, but, at least not in my area or situation, but they do have some resistance. They handle varroa better. And VSH bees are hygienic. Okay, that's that's a variation on hygienic behavior where the bees actually sense when the mites begin mating and open up the cell and clean out, take care of business. So there's multiple bees associated with hygienic behavior. Some of them uncap the cells, okay, and some of them cannibalize the pupa. If this is okay, these bees are doing this is probably American foul brood hygienic. Okay, they're getting rid of a diseased larvae, and they generally do it by eating it. So how do you know if your colony is hygienic? How are you going to test? If you've got like 5 hives or 6 hives and you like them all, they're productive, they seem to be pretty good, they've got mite resistance, and you can't decide, well, maybe you're going to pick like the top 2 or 3, and you might want to test for hygienic behavior. So there's something called a pinprick test, which I don't like because a lot of hygienic behavior involves the bees smelling, okay, either a pheromone produced by mites mating or the disease right through the cappings. Okay, so they have a very good sense of smell. And if you put a hole in the capping, it's like you just stabbed the larva with a sword and you release the odor. So you're really not challenging the bees properly in that test with the pinprick. So the correct way to do a hygienic test is by freezing the brood. And when, like at the University of Minnesota, they use liquid nitrogen. So they get a dewar, you buy this expensive stainless steel container that has the liquid nitrogen, and you pour the liquid nitrogen into a piece of PVC, which you've put into the frame, and you freeze the brood that way. Then, you take away the PVC and come back a day later and see how much the bees have cleaned out. If they've cleaned out more than 90% of the dead brood, the colony is considered hygienic. Less than that, they're not. But you don't have to have liquid nitrogen. I'm going to show you how to do it without. And then there's a new thing that just came out last year called UBO assay, and you spray it on the brood. Okay, it's like a spray, but I checked it out. It's really expensive, $175, and that only does 10 tests. I'm like, okay, I'm cheap. I'm a beekeeper. I'm going to do it a different way that doesn't cost anything, which I really like. Okay, so that's from a liquid nitrogen test there, okay, with the PVC. This is the way I do it. Okay, I get myself a frame, right? Frame of cap brood. I cut out a trapezoidal piece of brood. Okay.
Looks like a square to me.
Is there a question? I guess not. Okay. So I cut out, this is, okay, a trapezoid. I use a trapezoid to make it easier to fit back in, okay, the next day. So I cut that out. I put it in a Ziploc bag. I take it home. I put it in the freezer. The next day I come back, I put it back in the hive, okay? And they'll glue it in perfectly. And then the following day, so this here is day 3, I go back and look and see how much of that they have actually queened out. You're looking for a piece that has about 100 cells, maybe a little bit more. Okay, and this doesn't cost anything. It does involve one extra trip to the apiary, but it works perfectly well. Okay, and it's just as good as the liquid nitrogen test.
Landy,
Yes.
can you explain why you cut out that odd shaped piece?
Why I cut out the odd shaped piece?
So they understand.
Okay, I make a trapezoidal piece because if I made a square piece or a round piece, I wouldn't know how to orient it correctly. I might get it upside down, I might get it sideways. Making this shaped piece makes it easier to put it back in the way it came out. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that guy is very cute, but he's also very confused. He's trying to remember what the alcohol wash numbers were last year when he tested. Okay. What were his mite counts on his 5 hives? And he can't for the life of him remember. Okay. So that's why I'm going to tell you, if you want good queens, you need to keep good records. Okay. Right. If you raise queens from the colony that had the most mites last year, you're not going to get mite-resistant queens. Okay, so please record things like honey production, strength, gentleness, any disease issues. You got EFB on this one in spring and, had to treat with terramycin, and your alcohol wash numbers. Okay. So that way you have some numbers to look at when you go this year to select your breeder queen. So keep records. All right. By far, the biggest factor influencing queen quality, once you've picked your breeder queen, is nutrition. So if you raise your queens during the peak flows, you won't have to feed them, put in pollen substitute. You won't have to compensate for anything. The bees already will have a lot of good natural pollen from a variety of sources. They'll have plenty of nectar, and they will feed those queens exactly the way the queens need to be fed. Okay, so that's the black locust flow there, in case you didn't recognize. Okay. So, right, bees raise queens beautifully, right, without our doing anything to help them. And during swarm season, which is when you have all of those nectar and pollen flows, that's when swarm queens are probably the best quality queen you can get in terms of nutrition. Okay, not talking about the mating. Mating can be, well, actually mating too, because what do you have during swarm season? Abundant drones, right? So if you got abundant mature drones, you're going to have well-mated queens. Your likelihood of having well-mated queens is much higher. So during swarm season, okay, when they're raising queens and swarming, that is the best quality queen you're going to get anywhere. Next is a supersedure queen, because your queen is cooperating in her replacement. She's actually laying an egg in a queen cup. The bees are drawing it out into a queen cell, and that egg, because it starts really early, being fed royal jelly, will have good nutrition, provided there are good resources inside the hive. Okay, if that supersedure queen is getting raised during October, no, probably not going to be a good queen, might not even get mated. And the lowest quality or worst quality queen is probably an emergency queen. Why? Well, again, you've got the issues of you don't know what time of year it is, could happen at any time. But also, in an emergency situation, the bees are more likely to pick an older larva, sometimes as old as 4 days. And that larva has not had this copious diet of jelly, from day 0, that a queen that's being raised on purpose, like either supersedure or swarm queen has. So emergency queen, like taking a hive and just dequeening it, and having them raise a queen, especially a small hive, is like not the best way to do it. Okay, so for a hobbyist, here's a couple of ways that you can get a queen, okay, during swarm season without grafting and without doing a lot of work. Okay, method 1. Pick your very best, very strongest colony in spring before they start raising queen cells. Okay, and now you're going to take out the queen. Take the queen, put her in a nuke. She's fine, right? And now you've got this very strong colony with lots of resources, and they don't have a queen, but they've got tons and tons of young larvae. Okay, let them raise a new queen. And they will probably raise a nice queen, okay, because they've got young larvae and they've got lots of food. That's one way. Here's another way. Pick your very best, strongest colony in spring after they've started making swarm preparations. So they've started queen cells, but don't let them cap the queen cells, because once they cap the queen cells, they'll swarm. So keep a close eye on them and wait until those cells are about a day or 2 from being capped. Once they're a day or 2 from being capped, and this is in decent weather, okay, warm weather, make up nucleus colonies from that colony and give each one a frame with queen cells on it, okay? And those queen cells are going to get capped within a day or 2 days. So the nutrition is not nearly as much of an issue because they've already, made really nice, well-fed queens. So comparing these 2 methods, method 1 gives you only 1 new queen, okay? It may or may not stop the colony from swarming. You've dequeened the colony, but they may, after they've raised that new queen, decide, well, there's still lots of nectar and pollen out here. Let's swarm anyway. But you've got a new queen that has been raised by a very strong colony with abundant food resources, and you still get honey because you keep the colony intact. Method 2 gives you several queens, right? Almost certainly stops the colony from swarming because you broke it up into, basically nukes. You might still keep the original colony intact, but it's going to be much weaker than it started out. But those new queens were raised before you broke the hive up. So they were raised by a strong colony with abundant food resources. The timing on this method is tricky because not all the queen cells are necessarily going to be the same age. You really got to be on top of inspecting this one, okay? Otherwise, your colony might swarm on you. And the other thing is that you are moving frames with cells that are almost ready to be capped. And on day 15, okay, day 14 and 15 is when the queen's wing buds are forming. So if you jostle that cell, knock that cell accidentally, you can damage the queen's wing buds. So when you're transferring those frames, you have to be really careful to handle them very carefully. So you will get probably 4 or 5 queens using this method, but you're going to lose at least some of your honey crop, if not all of your honey crop. So you're giving up honey for queens. Now here's something.
Quick question for you.
Of course.
On method 2, are you still pulling your laying queen from that hive to prevent that swarm? So if you do miss a cell that was potentially capped a little sooner, that you don't have the swarm, or are you, so like your original hive is gonna keep a cell, you're gonna spread your cells to other nukes, and then your queen that was laying is still gonna get her own nuke to kind of prevent that.
Right.
Missed. Okay.
Exactly.
That's what I assumed. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, basically you're divvying up that entire colony and making nukes out of it. And
Gotcha.
one of the nukes has the old queen.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I see people do this, okay, and people talk about walkaway splits. I'm not a big fan of walkaway splits, where basically you take half the bees, or you take some of the bees anyway away, and you let the queenless half raise its own. I mean, if you do it in spring, you might be okay. But some people will do something like this. Take a strong colony, make up a lot of nukes with it. Give each nuke a frame of eggs and very young larvae. Leave the queen, with the original colony, and let the nukes raise queens. So what's the problem with this? Anybody want to take a wild guess?
Those new.
None of them are strong enough.
You nailed it. Exactly. Okay. The core principles of queen rearing, okay? You want the cells to be raised by a very strong, very well-fed colony. And a nuke is not that, okay? You might get lucky. If you have decent population in the nuke and the weather is perfect and there's lots of food, okay, and the bees can fly and get the food and you've got lots of nurse bees, it's entirely possible you'll get a good queen. But you're not like maximizing your chances of getting a good queen by doing that. Okay. So other methods for the small beekeeper. I've tried this one, the Nico method, with kind of limited success. I gave that up for grafting. I just taught myself, I bit the bullet and taught myself to graft. But the Nico method relies on this interesting little gizmo that you put in an empty frame, and you see how cleverly the bees have drawn out comb on either side of this little gizmo. And there's a screen that you put on top. You put the queen on this frame that has cells in it, okay, removable cells, and she lays eggs, or theoretically, she's supposed to lay eggs in the cell. And then once she's laid eggs in the cells, you make it accessible to the nurse bees. They feed the cells, and then you put them in, you put them in these in a cell frame. Okay. So the Genter method is basically the same thing, just slightly different. Then you've got the cell punch method. Okay. And this uses a special tool to actually punch out a cell
Okay.
that has the right age
Yes,
larva. You got a question?
No, we
Okay.
had someone hop on, but they were talking.
Oh, okay. You guys are a very talkative bunch. It's good. So you're actually punching out a cell with a 24-hour-old larva, taking it out, okay, and transferring it to a cell frame. And there's different gizmos for doing this. There are instructions that you can find online, but you can't like go to Better Bee or Daydant and Google cell punch. Most of them don't have anything. So you're it's kind of an interesting concept, but I haven't found anything that's like standardized where you can consistently do it. Then there's the Miller method. Bob Cole, who's passed away but was a master beekeeper from down south, used to advocate this method. In fact, he was, I heard about this first at an EAS conference where he was discussing it in the apiary. So you get a frame of an empty frame, get strips of foundation, okay, can't have wires in it. So you're basically using thin surplus foundation that you would use for raising comb honey, making comb honey. And you make these little, triangular strips, you put them on there. The bees draw it out into comb, okay, and you cut it so that there are day-old larvae exposed at the edges. Then you put it back in a queenless colony and the bees will build queen cells, okay, along the edges. They love those edges and they'll build a lot of queen cells. Then you're going to cut the queen cells out and put them into mating nukes. And again, it avoids the necessity for grafting. But quite honestly, to me, this is a lot more trouble than grafting. But these last, like that one in particular, or any one where you're cutting out swarm cells, for instance, you need cell protectors, or I think I would use cell protectors. And if you're cutting out a cell from a colony, make sure you cut out more than you think you're going to need. Okay. If you damage the comb, the bees will fix the comb. But if you damage the cell, okay, you just destroyed your queen. You don't want to damage the cell. And there's a couple of other techniques too. Some of you may have heard me talk about weird ways to control swarming. And these are 3 of those odd ways that will result in an extra queen. So the snow grove method, pagining, and shook swarming all result in a new queen that's fed by, a good strong colony. So you can get a decent queen. Okay, mating nukes. Okay, so this is my queen mating yard. And it is in my best, it's across a meadow from my very best apiary, my most productive apiary, where I think I average about 70 pounds of honey per hive, which is really high in New Jersey. The average is like 30. So I put these guys here and they fly, they mate. And if you note, okay, these are each individual nukes, but there are other ways of doing it, which I'm going to show you. So mating nukes are small colonies which are given a queen cell a day or 2 before the queen emerges. She's almost ready to come out. The queen flies from the nuke, she mates, then she returns to start laying, and you then evaluate her pattern. Okay, decide if you want to keep her or not. And if you want to keep her, you can either transfer her to a full-size colony, you can sell her, or you can keep her in the nuke and, overwinter her, whatever you want. So mating nukes, when you're making up your mating nukes, they should each have at least a frame or 2 of food. Okay, frame of nectar, frame of pollen, or a frame of nectar and pollen and a feeder. A couple of frames of capped and emerging brood and young bees, and a frame of drawn comb. You can shake additional nurse bees into these mating nukes, and that just gives them a little extra strength. If it's very hot weather or very cold weather, or small hive beetle are an issue, you may need to make up stronger nukes than this. Small hive beetle have just last year became an issue in New Jersey. So a lot of people in my area have been dealing with small hive beetle, and that never was in northern New Jersey. We never had a problem. Southern New Jersey, yes, but in the north, we never had a problem. I'm guessing you guys haven't had any issues with them yet?
Very rarely,
Any damage?
very, very rarely.
Yeah,
I think in my 14 years, I've only seen it once.
okay, yeah. Weak colony, if you let the colony get weak, they're a problem. But with strong colonies, they tend not to be. So that's, the mating nuke. You put the queen cell in between your frames of capped and emerging brood. And, the open drawn comb is for the queen to start laying. She's got to have a spot, and lots of food. So there's other ways of doing this. I happen to like individual nukes because I like to be able to pick a nuke up, put it on my truck, and take it wherever it's needed. If there are multiple colonies in one nuke, for me, that's a pain in the neck. I don't want to deal with that, which, it's like queen castles, have 3 or 4 compartments, or you can make a queen castle using a deep and some what we call follower boards, boards that you're putting in between frames to separate the bees, and then you'd have to make, their own covers. And this type of mating nuke is pretty, I know Mike Palmer uses these, or something very similar where he's got several queens mating from the same box with separate entrances. So, but he's not picking up any of those and taking them anywhere. My operation's a little bit different. He's using those only for mating. So, this is basically my operation, and it's sustainable. I never have to buy bees from anybody else. Okay. So I start by raising my queens in the mating nukes. Okay. I grow the nukes. So I super my nukes. And what I want ideally is I want 2 to 3 boxes, with the top box being all honey. Okay. And in between, some honey and nice, strong young queens. And I move these nukes to a separate yard after the flows have stopped. So once we go into dearth, I have to get my nukes out of the yard where there are full-size production colonies nearby, because the nukes are at risk. They'll get robbed. So the nukes get loaded onto the truck and go to their own yard in a totally different area where they will winter. And that nuke yard is a resource yard. So anytime I get a drone layer, okay, or colony swarms at a weird time and needs a little boost of strength, I've got queens, I've got brood, and I've got food. Going into the winter, I'm looking at the colony, it doesn't have enough honey. I have resources that I can give it from that nuke yard. So, and then come fall, everything gets combined so that I've got 2 to 3 stories. I typically like 3-story nukes, and then they get wintered. So, and in spring, now I've got all the resources to replace any dead outs that I have, because I've overwintered my nukes. So this is the nukes in the process. These nukes are growing, okay? They're being fed, they're being supered, and I'm, basically they're in nuke size equipment, but they're being allowed to expand. And then come winter, they get wrapped and they get doubled up with entrances facing the opposite direction. I put bubble wrap around and then tar paper over the bubble wrap, and these guys winter beautifully. This year, I have in past years wintered as many as 60 nukes this way. I'm trying to scale down, being, in my 70s now. I keep telling myself I should be trying to retire. So this year I'm only wintering like 20 nukes, and they survive beautifully. I have, like, out of the 20, I lost 1, and I wasn't sure it was going to make it to begin with. So, and that is it. Okay.
Great.
Questions?
Good
I
question.
we can unmute and ask questions.
Yep. It is a lot of information to take in, and that's why we recorded it, because you can watch it again.
And if you want, I will share those slides with you. I don't know if you have a platform for that, like my club has a website, and
We have a YouTube channel that we can put it on that's private.
okay. All right, good.
No problem.
It is a lot of material.
It is the material, but it lets you know, when I've taught, I think I've had all of you as students that are here in person,
Mhm.
to become sustainable. Do I want to sell you a $50 queen? Of course I would. I have it. But I want to see you become successful and sustainable for you to, take that $50 and go out to dinner instead of having to buy a queen for your hive.
I agree totally. And you know what? Queen rearing is fun. It's like I can't even begin to tell you how much fun it is. Because it's challenging. You kind of need to get everything right. Um, but it's a blast. And the satisfaction you get if you've raised, your own queen and that queen makes honey for you and is gentle and produces a colony that thrives and makes it through the winter. There's nothing like that. It's a lot of fun.
Do you candle your cells?
I don't, but what I look for, I've candled my eggs, my chicken eggs.
Same.
I don't candle the queen cells. I look for royal jelly in the JCBC cup.
Okay.
And a nice big cell.
Because I know at the Cornell Queen class, we learned to candle them too.
And do you do that?
Not on all of them, but I do always have a flashlight in my bee bucket that I can stick behind them if I'm questioning something.
Yeah. I may do it, and I have to, maybe this year I'll just take a look because I've never actually done that. They didn't do that at the university. I've taken a couple of queen rearing classes. I think the best one was from the University of Minnesota, but I also took one in Pennsylvania with Dennis Van Engelstorp, and that was a lot of fun too. But nobody talked about candling queen cells. Yeah.
So I'd like to know how many that are online have grown their own queens. Show of hands. or
Good.
Raise your hand on your Zoom. So we have a few.
That's good.
That's great.
Yeah.
I hope that this has given you some other options. I know, when you get that spray to clean your keyboards or your sewing machine, to spray air, they make a liquid nitrogen that's in those small cans now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's
Well,
what
that's handy.
yeah, it's very handy because I can drag it out to the bee yard with me.
That's
So,
wonderful. That's
yeah, got the tube
great
on.
news. Yeah.
Where
But
did you get that?
I ordered it online, Barbara, through Amazon.
Really?
Oh, okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you. Someone
That's
had
good to
said
know.
that there was a wart spray that you could use, but
It's
I don't think that it comes in a spray anymore.
no, you can I can give you a link. I can pop it off to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would strongly recommend,
Yeah.
check your bees for hygienic behavior. There's so much good that you get out of that. Mite resistance to American foul brood, to chalk brood. Hygienic bees rock. They are good.
Yep, and you want to make sure that your drone colonies are just as hygienic.
Yes. If you have the option, if you have a situation where you can situate a drone mother yard about half a mile away from your queen mating yard, okay, that's ideal. Most hobbyists don't necessarily have that as an option, but select the drone mother yards just as carefully as you're selecting your queens.
Yep.
Queens, yeah.
Okay, Joanne would like to know what mite treatments do you typically use in your nukes?
Oh, okay, the nukes. Yeah, the nukes are tough. Apivar, but I'm starting to see resistance, okay, on the part of the mites. So the treatment that I use basically oxalic acid vaporization in fall and in winter, okay, as a cleanup treatment. And during the growing season, I'm using Apigard, okay. a half dose of Apogard. Can't use Formic Pro.
No.
So it's tough. Try to get a treatment on the bees before they get made up into nukes, so that they become nukes, being as clean as I can get them, and then they'll get treated again.
Mary Beth would like to know where you can purchase the glasses that you received from the podiatrist friend.
Amazon has them. Yeah. Amazon has everything, right? Liquid nitrogen.
I
Well,
got a pair from Amazon and I really like them.
yeah, they work really well.
They do.
Okay. Okay, Compound W sells it at Rite Aid and CVS for $23.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
When you're selecting your drone mothers, is there different requirements that you would look for as opposed to selecting your queen mothers, or just kind of the same?
No, basically it's the same thing. I mean, the drone mothers are the runner-up colonies, you know.
Okay.
They should be, and you can give them drone comb. You know, you can give them the green frames of drone comb, but you're raising drones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question on the hygienic behavior?
Sure.
If you did use the freeze type of spray, how big of a circle would you use? Like a 2-inch PVC or
4-inch.
Yeah,
4-inch?
4-inch
Thank you.
is typically what's used.
Thank you.
Yeah, the inside of a 4-inch will give you approximately 100 cells.
Yep.
You want to cut the piece probably about 4 or 5 inches deep. You don't need a huge long pipe. You know, you want it so you can still get the liquid nitrogen to the caps easily. Have it
With the
over.
spray, that's not
But
like
also-
liquid.
Right.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to check that out this year. Save me a trip.
And it's handy,
Yeah,
small and it's handy, and you know, you don't need a lot of extra equipment with it.
exactly.
See, that we always share our ideas, the beekeepers.
Yeah, we do.
So. Anybody else have questions? If not, we were gonna thank you very much, Landi, for your presentation this evening.
Thank you so much for letting me try this out on you guys.
Hey, Jan, on behalf of Pawtuckaway Beekeepers, thank you very much for the invite. We really appreciate it. I see quite a few of our group on here. And thank you, Landi, for the very informative and interesting presentation.
Always my pleasure. Thank you for coming. And now we can all go eat, right?
Yeah, we can.
Love
We-
it.
I want to remind everybody that's on that hasn't signed up yet for the Beekeepers Spring Meeting, that we've got that coming up on March 23rd. It's a great program. We've got a great speaker and a wonderful raffle that's going to happen. You don't want to miss that. We still have 2 more B classes left, classes 5 and 6. So if anybody wants to hop on to class 6, it's going to be April 13th, and that's on winterizing. I know a lot of you have questions about it. So if that's something that you want to take, just give me a holler and we'll get you set up for that.
All right. I'm going to bid you guys adieu and
Good night.
have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Bye.
And those of you that want to stay on for the rest of our meeting here, it's not going to be too long tonight. I just need permission to write a check for a nucleus colony. It's going to be at cost that North Country Beekeepers had already decided that they wanted to give to New Hampshire Beekeepers as part of their raffle.
That's a nice.
So I just need permission to write White Mountain Apiary that check. I won't go do it unless I have permission. Keep things on the up and up. So we have a motion.
Second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, then we can go ahead and do that. I know, just something simple, something simple. How interested is anyone in keeping colonies? I know some of you don't have space for extra colonies. How many people might be interested in keeping, there's room for 4 colonies up at the Rocks Estate. So if anybody is interested in running that club apiary by moving their hives there or getting hives and putting them there, I want you to please reach out to me. Get it all set up. I have the solar charger for the fence. We wouldn't leave it there while all the construction was going on. So we do have that, and we'll get it all hooked back up and ready to go.
Does high school still have?
You know, the person who was in charge of that left her, and I've reached out to the school and I have not heard back from them. So I don't think that they know what's happening with it, but I can reach out again. It would be sad because we spent a lot of years working with that program. Somebody else is talking and I don't know who it is. I think it's Mike's. Yeah, it was Mike's. It was Mike's. He's got a TV or something going. We had all that extra noise, Mike. Sorry.
April 6th. The winter rising, is that at the library?
April 13th. That is at the Littleton Community Center. That's your class 6.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Okay. Good night, folks.
Good night.